What if the meal in front of you right now actually has a backstory no one ever bothered to share with you? What if the tastes you grew up loving, the ones that feel timeless, almost sacred in a way, didn't come from where you always assumed, but instead started somewhere completely unexpected? Imagine this. Those familiar flavors you think of as ancient and inevitable might have actually taken root in a place most people casually dismiss as nothing more than beaches, amusement parks, and vacation spots. Florida rarely gets a mention in traditional food history books, but honestly, maybe it should. Because some of the world's most recognizable and beloved foods didn't originate in places like Paris, New York, or even centuries-old kitchens across Asia. Instead, they were born out of the heat, the energy, and the wonderfully unpredictable chaos that defines the Sunshine State. In a surprising way, this is where it all began. And today, that's exactly where we're headed, straight to Florida. Get ready, because what we're about to share is packed with twists you probably didn't see coming. First up, key lime pie, easily my all-time favorite dessert. Walk into just about any diner across the United States, and chances are you'll spot it listed on the menu. You know the one. That soft, pale yellow slice that's both tart and sweet, sitting on a buttery graham cracker crust and topped with a fluffy layer of whipped cream. But here's the thing. Key lime pie didn't originate in some polished restaurant kitchen or come from the mind of a trained pastry chef. Its roots trace back to the Florida Keys in the late 1800s, where it was created out of pure necessity in a place where fresh milk and proper ovens were hard to come by. The person most often credited with bringing this dessert to life is Aunt Sally, a cook who worked for a wealthy sponge fishing entrepreneur named William Curry in Key West. She took the small, incredibly fragrant key limes that grew naturally across the islands and mixed their juice with sweetened condensed milk, a canned staple that didn't need refrigeration, and egg yolks. What she ended up with was something pretty remarkable, a pie that didn't even require baking. The acidity from the lime juice actually cooked the filling all on its own through a chemical reaction. That's the detail most people never hear about. So you've got a dessert that requires no heat at all, created in a place where reliable ice and refrigeration barely existed. This wasn't some stroke of culinary genius born in comfort. It was a solution shaped by survival. And today, that same humble invention holds an official title as Florida's state pie. Next on the list, the Cuban sandwich. It's crisped to a perfect golden finish on the outside, while the inside is stacked with roasted pork, ham, Swiss cheese, pickles, and a swipe of mustard. It's so well put together that it almost feels like a team of culinary masterminds carefully designed every layer. Here's the twist, though. The Cuban sandwich didn't actually come from Cuba. Its real origins trace back to Tampa, Florida, in the late 1800s, specifically in the immigrant neighborhood of Ybor City. This was a bustling area where Cuban, Spanish, and Italian workers filled cigar factories and needed something quick, affordable, and satisfying to eat during their breaks. What makes the Tampa version unique is the addition of Genoa salami, a clear influence from the Italian workers who labored side by side with Cuban immigrants. That one ingredient, the salami, has sparked more debate than you'd expect, becoming one of the most hotly contested details in sandwich history. Over in Miami, they serve their own take on the Cuban sandwich, but without the salami. The back and forth over which version is the real one has been going strong for more than 100 years now. Still, Tampa tends to have the historical evidence to back up its claim. At its core, the Cuban sandwich is more than just something to eat. It's a reflection of immigration itself. It tells the story of different cultures coming together, pressed under heat and pressure until they create something entirely new. And honestly, when you look at it that way, it mirrors what Florida has always been. Food number 3, orange juice. There's probably no breakfast image more familiar than a chilled glass of orange juice glowing in the morning light. It's been everywhere for generations, on cereal boxes, in hospital meals, and spread across hotel breakfast buffets. Honestly, it's hard to think of anything that pairs as effortlessly with breakfast as orange juice does. But here's the surprising part. The version of orange juice we drink every day is largely a Florida creation, and it didn't really exist in its modern form until the 1940s. Before that, people typically ate oranges whole, and drinking the juice was considered more of a rare treat. Something delicate, quick to spoil, and nearly impossible to transport over long distances. Everything shifted in 1948 when scientists at the University of Florida figured out how to make frozen concentrated orange juice. This breakthrough made it possible to preserve that fresh citrus flavor and ship it far beyond where oranges were grown. Interestingly, the push behind this innovation came in part from the U.S. military, which had been trying to find a reliable way to supply vitamin C to soldiers stationed overseas during World War II. The solution didn't make it to troops in time for the war, but it quickly found its way into households across the country soon after. Here's the detail that really catches people off guard. Before Florida's orange juice boom, most Americans had only tasted it a few times in their lives, if at all. Florida didn't just cultivate oranges, it completely transformed the way Americans start their mornings, one frozen can at a time. Food number 4, the grouper sandwich. Along Florida's Gulf Coast, this isn't just something you order off a menu, it's something locals take seriously, almost like a rite of passage. Picture a thick, fresh fillet of grouper, either lightly breaded and fried or simply grilled, tucked into a soft bun with lettuce, tomato, and a splash of lemon to finish it off. The grouper sandwich became a staple in the mid-20th century, especially around Tampa Bay and other Gulf Coast communities. It all started in small waterfront fish houses and dockside shacks, where fishermen would bring in their daily catch and sell it straight to nearby kitchens. No freezers, no complicated supply chains, just incredibly fresh fish moving straight from boat to plate. What really made this sandwich stand out wasn't some elaborate cooking method. It was all about how close the source was. In many cases, the fish went from the ocean to the grill or fryer within just a few hours, sometimes even less. But here's something most people don't realize. Grouper is actually one of the most commonly substituted fish in the U.S. Studies have shown that in some areas, more than a third of what's sold as grouper is actually a completely different, cheaper fish. That's what makes ordering a grouper sandwich at a long-standing waterfront spot in Florida feel like more than just grabbing a bite to eat. It's an act of trust. You're relying on a tradition and a fishing culture that values honesty and freshness above everything else. And that idea, where freshness becomes part of identity, is something Florida has built its entire coastal food scene around. Food number 5. Everglades seasoning. Most spice blends tend to sit quietly in the back of a cupboard, only getting attention every once in a while. This one is completely different. It refuses to be ignored. Across Florida, you'll find it everywhere, from home kitchens to backyard barbecues to fishing camps scattered around the state. This all-purpose seasoning has built a kind of loyal following that most major spice brands spend years trying to create and rarely achieve. It was first put together in 1988 by Jeff Mock in LaBelle, a small rural town right on the edge of the Everglades. His goal was simple: capture the essence of Florida-style outdoor cooking in a single blend. The flavor hits bold and savory right away, with a subtle smokiness and a gentle heat that builds over time and sticks with you. Mock originally created it to season wild game and freshly caught fish, the kind of meals cooked outdoors, maybe near a marsh at sunset, with no strict recipe and no one watching. What really makes this seasoning stand out is what it represents, especially in a world dominated by large corporate food brands. It's deeply local and never tried to be anything else. It came from one specific place, shaped by one particular way of cooking and eating. There was no big national advertising push behind it. Instead, it spread the old-fashioned way, through word of mouth. Floridians shared it with family, packed it into luggage, and mailed it to friends who had moved away and couldn't find it anywhere else. In a food culture that's often focused on scaling things up and reaching mass audiences, Everglades seasoning shows something different. The strongest loyalty comes from people who feel like a product was made just for them. Food number 6. Stone crab claws. Some foods feel fancy, sure, but then there are dishes that taste like the ocean itself is trying to impress you. Stone crab claws fall into that second category. Cracked open right at the table, served cold, and paired with a bold mustard dipping sauce, they've become one of the most memorable seafood experiences out there, and they're deeply tied to Florida. The story really begins in Miami Beach during the 1920s, when a restaurateur named Joe Weiss started serving stone crab claws at his small waterfront spot. The idea came after a marine biologist from the University of Miami suggested that these crabs were not only edible, but actually worth eating. Up until that point, both fishermen and diners had mostly overlooked them. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. It's not just about the taste, it's about how they're harvested. Stone crabs have the rare ability to regenerate their claws. Fishermen remove just one claw and then return the crab to the water alive, allowing it to regrow the missing limb over roughly a year. That makes this one of the few seafood industries in the world built around a renewable, self-sustaining process. What Joe Weiss unknowingly introduced wasn't just a new dish. It was an early example of sustainable seafood practices, something marine conservationists still highlight today. So in a way, this isn't just indulgence for indulgence's sake. It's a luxury that comes with a built-in sense of responsibility. In Florida, even the most decadent foods manage to carry a bit of conscience with them. Food number 7. Swamp cabbage, better known to most people as hearts of palm. Not every dish in Florida came from creativity or chance. Some came from something much more basic: the need to survive. Long before it showed up on elegant menus, swamp cabbage was simply a way to stay alive. This ingredient is taken from the inner core of the sable palm, which also happens to be Florida's official state tree. Indigenous groups like the Seminole and early settlers relied on it when food was scarce and the environment made survival difficult. Getting to it, though, isn't exactly gentle. Harvesting the heart of palm means cutting down the entire tree to access that soft, pale center hidden inside. The result is a delicate, ivory-colored core with a mild, slightly artichoke-like flavor and a texture that's both tender and lightly crisp at the same time. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Today, hearts of palm have gone global. You'll find them featured in upscale restaurants, packed into glass jars at specialty stores, and even used in modern plant-based cooking as a meat alternative, shredded to resemble things like pulled pork or crab. What's remarkable is the shift in meaning. Something that once served as a survival food for people struggling in the wilderness is now being reimagined as part of the future of sustainable eating. In a way, it's a complete reversal. What used to be a last resort option has become a thoughtful, intentional choice. One of Florida's simplest, most overlooked foods has quietly evolved into one of its most forward-thinking. Food number 8. Datil pepper hot sauce. You've probably heard of habaneros, and jalapenos are practically everywhere. But the datil pepper? Outside of northeastern Florida, most people have no idea it even exists. And honestly, that's part of what makes its story so interesting. The datil pepper is a small chili with a serious kick, known for its intense heat and surprisingly fruity flavor. It grows almost exclusively around St. Augustine, which also happens to be the oldest continuously inhabited European-established settlement in the United States. Its presence there isn't random. It's tied to a historical migration story that researchers are still working to fully understand. The most widely accepted explanation traces the pepper back to the Menorcans, who arrived in Florida in the 1760s. They were brought over as indentured laborers from the island of Minorca to work on indigo plantations, and along with their traditions, they carried this unique pepper across the Atlantic. What really sets the datil apart isn't just its heat, though it can absolutely rival a habanero, but its flavor. It's sweet, layered, and complex in a way most super hot peppers aren't. Instead of just overwhelming your taste buds, it kind of draws you in, balancing intensity with a surprising depth. In St. Augustine, families have been making datil pepper hot sauce for generations, often guarding their recipes closely and passing them down like prized heirlooms. And that's what makes it stand out even more today. In a world where hot sauce has turned into a massive global industry driven by branding and viral trends, the datil pepper has stayed rooted in its origins. It remains a distinctly local flavor, one that still belongs to the community that's preserved it all this time. Food number 9. Tupperware. Stick with me on this one because it completely reshapes how you think about storing, sharing, and preserving food. I get it. It might sound like a stretch at first. Technically, Tupperware isn't food, but it absolutely qualifies as one of the most game-changing innovations in modern food culture. It all started in Kissimmee in 1946 when a chemist and inventor named Earl Tupper took polyethylene waste, a byproduct from oil refineries, and transformed it into something entirely new: a lightweight, airtight container. His design included a patented burping seal that locked in freshness far better than anything people had used before. Before this invention came along, leftovers were usually covered with whatever was handy: plates, wax paper, maybe foil if you had it. Refrigerators didn't do a great job of keeping smells separate, and food waste in the average American home was surprisingly high. Tupper's creation solved a problem so basic that most people hadn't even realized it needed solving, until they experienced the difference for themselves. But here's where the story takes a turn. Tupperware didn't initially succeed in stores. The real breakthrough came from Brownie Wise, a single mother from Georgia who, in the early 1950s, introduced the idea of Tupperware parties. Instead of relying on retail shelves, she turned the product into a social experience, with women selling it directly in their homes. That approach took off in a big way, bringing in over $1 million in sales before most Americans had even seen Tupperware in a store. So in the end, Florida didn't just give rise to a clever container. It unintentionally helped spark a new way for women to earn income and build independence in post-war America. This isn't just a story about food storage. It's about a quiet revolution, sealed inside a piece of plastic. Food number 10. Gatorade. There's probably no sports drink in the world as instantly recognizable as this one, maybe no drink at all. That bright, neon-colored, electrolyte-packed liquid has been poured over championship coaches, handed to drained athletes, and stuffed into gym bags and convenience store shelves for more than 50 years. It all started in 1965 at the University of Florida in Gainesville, when a kidney disease researcher named Dr. Robert Cade was approached by an assistant football coach with a pressing question. Why were players stopping sweating in the Florida heat? And why were so many collapsing during practice? Cade and his research team spent weeks studying the Gators, tracking exactly what their bodies lost in the oppressive Florida humidity. From that data, they created a precise formula: water, sodium, sugar, potassium, phosphate, and a touch of lemon juice to replace what sweat was draining from the athletes. The first version reportedly tasted so bad that players nearly refused to drink it. It was Cade's wife who suggested adding lemon flavoring, a small tweak that transformed a lab experiment into a drink athletes could actually swallow. Here's the scale of what came from that moment. Today, Gatorade is a $5 billion a year brand, sold in over 80 countries, and the University of Florida has earned more than $280 million in royalties from its invention. What started as a coach's question about collapsing players didn't just save a team. It revolutionized athletic performance worldwide. Born in the heat, engineered for endurance, and completely Floridian. 10 foods, 1 state, and a collection of stories most people never hear. From the survival kitchens of the Florida Keys to research labs in Gainesville. From the cigar factories of Ybor City to the remote marshes of the Everglades, Florida has quietly influenced the way the world eats, drinks, and even stores food for over a century. It was never just beaches and amusement parks. It's always been something stranger, more inventive, more fascinating, and absolutely worth knowing. If this changed the way you see Florida, or even the way you look at your own plate, hit like and subscribe to First Taste, and let us know in the comments which of these 10 foods surprised you the most. We have a feeling everyone's answer is going to be different.